In 1969, it was determined that racism is a mental disorder. The specific nature of the destructiveness of racism was set forth by the caucus of Black psychiatrists at the 1969 annual meeting at the American Psychiatric Association. The Black Caucus stated that racism was not only the #1 mental health problem in this nation, but additionally was the #1 cause of all other mental problems. And this is what was defined as a mental illness. Asa G. Iliad, who's a psychologist, who talked about this in the 1980s and 90s, had expressed that it has 5 different signs: racial discrimination or racism being a mental disorder, denial of reality, to deny that it exists, that's perceptual distortion. Oh, that's not racism, that is bullying. Oh, that's not racism, that is based upon gender discrimination. That's not racism, that's a class distinction. Perceptual distortion, always trying to ethnocentritize it, make it a European, make it a British issue by camouflaging over the race. This is what this is about: perceptual distortion, a phobia of feeling different, a fear of feeling different. So we see this within society with the mental illness. We see in where, unfortunately, where white women are putting different sorts of fat in their lips to imitate Black women. When it was on Black women, it was rubber lips. Now they're taking it over. It's known as beauty and aesthetics. It was never aesthetically beautiful on a Black woman. But now it is because of whiteness and white women. This is a phobia of feeling different. This is what has happened over time. And I can give many other examples. Delusions of grandeur. The person who killed George Floyd was sat there with his knee on his neck for approximately, 10 minutes. Just looking, delusion of grandeur. Nothing is going to happen to me. Looking straight at the camera. This is what power and privilege does. Power and privilege gives you an element of responsibility and feels that you cannot be accountable for your behavior. That is a sickness that comes as a mental disorder when racism is acted out, whether it's from the psychological, from the emotional, into the practical, behavioral manifestations. This is what happens. And then blaming the victim. They did the same thing with Rodney King. If he stopped, he wouldn't have got beaten. The 4 police who beat him turned out, I felt my life was threatened by this Black man. An armed Black man, by the way, you know. George Floyd was unarmed. And the list just goes on and on, where police are using this thing, where they're falsifying reports. And then what happens after they falsify reports? When some smartphone has filmed them, they're still allowed to keep their jobs, they're still allowed to keep their pensions, and they're still allowed to go home and kiss their wives and their kids goodnight after they've just killed somebody. And this is a problem. So put the blame on the victim. They shouldn't have done this, they shouldn't have done that, they shouldn't have been in this area. So this is what has happened. And this has become an international phenomenon. We even know what took place in China. The reason why we don't talk about racism within China was because that was taken over by the George Floyd death, where Chinese people, the authorities, were throwing Black people out of apartments on the streets. This is what they were doing. And when they spoke to the diplomat, oh no, it's not happening. Okay, denial of reality, perceptual distortion. Or maybe they went onto the streets because they had a fear that they were going to contract coronavirus within the buildings. This is what he was saying. A phobia of feeling different. Delusions of grandeur, where they felt that they, even though it's supposed to have started in that part, they wanted to project it on someone else, blame the victim, project blame on someone else. So this is what happens. So you can see how racism becomes a mental disorder.